Let's do chapter 5. Down in Cavern Hole, the great feast had slackened off. So had a lot of belts. Redwall mice and their guests sat back replete. There were still great quantities of food uneaten. Abbot Mortimer whispered in Friar Hugo's ear. Friar, I want you to pack up a large sack with food, hazelnuts, cheese, bread, cakes, anything you see fit. Give it to Mrs. Churchmouse as secretly as you can without attracting attention. Poverty is an ugly specter when a mousewife has that many mouths to feed as she does. Oh, and be sure that her husband doesn't suspect what you are doing. John Churchmouse may be poor, but he's also proud. I fear he might not accept charitable gifts. Hugo nodded knowingly and waddled off to do his abbot's bidding. Cornflower and Matthias had become quite friendly. They were young mice of the same age. Though their temperaments were different, they found something in common, an interest in Tim and Tess, the twin church mice. They had passed a pleasant evening, joking and playing games with the little creatures. Tess had clambered into Matthias's lap and fallen asleep, whereupon baby Tim did likewise in the velvety fur of Cornflower. She smiled at Matthias and stroked Tim's small head. Ah, bless their little paws, don't they look peaceful? Matthias nodded contentedly in agreement. Colin Vole tittered aloud and remarked rather foolishly, "Oh, would you look at Matthias and Cornflower there, a nursin' two babies like they was an old wedded couple? Well, crumble my bank." Brother Alf reprimanded him sharply. "Here now, you keep a latch on that silly tongue of yours, Colin Vole. Don't you know that someday Matthias will be a Redwall mouse? And don't let me hear you slandering young Cornflower. She's a decent mouse from a good family. Mark my words, Master Vole. I could say a thing or two to your mum and dad. Only last evening I saw you play and catch the bulrush with young Harvest Mouse. What was her name now?" Colin Vole blushed until his nose was dry. He flounced off, swishing his tail, muttering aloud, going outside to take in the air. Matthias caught a nod and glance from the abbot. Excusing himself to Cornflower, he deposited the sleeping Tess gently upon his chair and went across to him. "Ah, Matthias, my son, here you are. Did you enjoy my Jubilee feast?" "Yes, thank you, Father," Matthias replied. Good, chuckled the abbot. "Now, I was going to ask Brother Alf or Edmund to go on a special errand, but they're no longer young mice, and both look quite yeary as of this late hour. So I thought I might ask my chief grayling catcher to carry out this special task for me." Matthias could not help standing a bit taller. "Say the word, and I'm your mouse, sir." The abbot leaned forward and spoke confidently. "Do you see the church mouse family? Well, it's such a long way back home for them on foot. Good heavens, there are so many of them. I thought it would be a splendid idea if you were to drive them home in the abbey cart, along with others going that way. Constance Badger would pull the cart, of course, while you could act as a guide and bodyguard. Take a good stout staff with you, young Matthias." The young mouse needed no second bidding. Drawing himself up to his full height, he saluted in a smart military fashion. "Leave it to me, Father Abbot. Old Constance is a bit slow thinking. I'll take complete responsibility." The abbot shook with silent laughter as he watched Matthias march off with a soldier-like swagger. Flip-flop, flip-flop. He tripped and fell flat on his tail. "Oh, dear. I'll have to get that young mouse some sandals that aren't so big," the abbot said to himself for the second time that day. Well, what a stroke of luck. Fancy Cornflower's family living so close to the church mouse brood. Matthias was only too glad to offer them a lift home. Would Miss Cornflower like to sit next to him? She most certainly would. Cornflower's parents sat inside the cart, her mum helping Mrs. Churchmouse with the little ones, while her dad chattered away with John Churchmouse as they shared a pipe of old bracken twist. Father Hugo came out and dumped a bulky sack next to Mrs. Churchmouse. "Abbot says thank you for the loan of bowls and tablecloths, ma'am." The fat friar gave her a huge wink. "Oh, comfy back there?" called Matthias. "Right, off we go, Constance." The big badger trundled the cart away as they called their good nights. She nodded at Methuselah, the ancient gatekeeper mouse. As the cart rolled out onto the road, a sliver of golden moon looked down from a star-pierced summer night. Matthias gazed upward, feeling as if he were slowly turning with the silent earth. Peace was all about him. The baby mice inside the cart whimpered fitfully in their small secret dreams. Constance ambled slowly along, as though she were out on a nighttime stroll, pulling no weight at all. The stout ash staff lay forgotten on the footboard. Cornflower dozed against Matthias's shoulder. She could hear a gentle lull of her father's voice and that of John Churchmouse, blending with the hum of nocturnal insects from the meadow and hedges on this balmy summer night. The summer of the late rose. Cornflower turned the words over in her mind, dreamily thinking of the old rambler that bloomed in the Abbey gardens. Normally, it was in full red flower by now, but this year, for some unknown reason, it had chosen to flower late. It was covered in dormant young rosebuds, even now well into June, a thing that happened only infrequently, and usually heralded an extra long, hot summer. Old Methuselah could only remember 3 other such summers in his long lifetime. Accordingly, he had advised that it be marked on the calendar and in the Redwall Chronicles as the summer of the late rose. Cornflower's head sank lower in sleep. The old cart rolled on gently down the long, dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Churchmouse lived, as had his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance wasn't able to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly, and without warning, they were roused by the thunder of hooves. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air about them as it gathered momentum. The ground began trembling with the rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road to a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave. Her blunt claws churned the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down to the slope of the ditch where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure, while John Churchmouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped with shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart, which bounced wildly from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay, but they were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than he had ever seen. Their heavy, tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons. Pikes, knives, spears, and long, rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly at the backboard of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw, he grasped a long pole with a ferret's head spiked on it, while in the other was his thick, enormous tail, which he cracked like a whip. Laughing madly and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as the horse and wagon clattered off down the road into the night. As suddenly as they had come, they were gone. Matthias walked out onto the road, staff in hand. Stray whips of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the Abbey cart back into the road. Cornflower was helping her mother and Mrs. Churchmouse to calm the little one's tears of fright. Together, they stood in the cart tracks amid the settling dust. "Did you see that? I saw it, but I don't believe it. What in heavens was that? What in hell, more like? All those rats, such big ones, too. Aye, and that one in the back, he looked like the devil himself." Seeing Matthias still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over leadership. She wheeled the cart around. "I think we'd best head back to the Abbey for now," she said firmly. "Father Abbot will want to know about this straight away." Knowing the badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. "Right, Cornflower, get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies," he said. "Mr. Fieldmouse, Mr. Churchmouse, up front with Constance, please." Silently, the mice did as ordered. The cart moved off with Matthias positioned at the back, providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges, facing down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken.